Hello, everybody. We're just going to wait a few minutes and while we have other people joining in. And if I can ask people to turn your mics off and turn your cameras off, please. Greatly appreciated. Yeah, we still have people joining in tonight's webinar, so we'll just wait till that settles down a bit. Yeah, just keeping people abreast of things. If you've just joined in, please turn off your mics and please turn off your cameras. Just want to say thank you to everybody joining us this evening. I know for some of you it is quite late in the evening. Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for coming out this evening. I think we're going to get started and other people will join as they do. I'm really excited to welcome the speakers here that are going to address little moments and big connections and the importance of that. We have wonderful presenters this evening, and the two of them will talk about some of those moments that people forget to acknowledge and how it pertains to acquiring language. So we look forward to hearing what they have to say about those moments. I want to set up some ground rules and run through those before we proceed with the actual presentation for this evening. So I'm sure many of you are looking for Robin, but Robin is not here tonight. I am. Usually I am here behind the scenes, but tonight I am not behind the scenes. I'm Megan Youngs, and I work with Silent Voice in Ontario. And tonight I'll be helping with the moderation of the seminar as well as looking after the chat. I would like to do a land acknowledgement. I want to recognize, the work that's being done here in Canada and the people who were on the lands prior to us being here, whether it's to the east and the west or the north to the south. But so many people have been the preservers of the land and the water and the forest and the trees to make sure that we still have a place. And we're very thankful to be on those treaty lands, and we are committed to reconciliation to work together in the future. And once again, the land that we are here is various treaty organizations in Ontario, Saskatchewan, and other provinces, because we do have people from Nova Scotia, from Manitoba, British Columbia, Quebec. So we have quite a cross grouping of individuals. So we want to make sure that we all acknowledge the land that we are on, regardless of where you are in Canada or the USA. Tonight, we are partnering with Saskatchewan Deaf and Hard of Hearing Services and Silent Voice in Ontario. And we make these webinars available on a monthly basis. If you have any questions about the webinars that we present, please feel free to contact me. Tonight's presentation will be recorded, and after a few days, that will be made available to people to read or to look at again. It'll be on our website, PODHH, Parents of Deaf and Hard of Hearing. So you can go down there and be able to watch that. And we'll also be switching it over to YouTube. There's a new sign for the interpreter, so just clarifying the sign. So in a few days, it will be then available on YouTube. Tonight's presentation is for parents primarily, and we have other people who have been involved that may not be parents. So we do have professionals that are here that want to take advantage of that information, and we welcome them. But we want to make sure that we give parents the space and the safe space so that they can ask questions without any judgment. So that is our emphasis for these webinars. I will be introducing the presenters right away. Both have mentioned that they are open to questions throughout their presentation at certain times, and in the end, you can also ask questions. And then when that is all said and done, we'll be wrapping up the webinar. And as for who they are, we have Dallas Boyd, the Godonson, and she's an ASL consultant. Hi. And she works with Silent Voice, a Canadian organization providing the infant hearing program, ASL consulting services, and supporting families with babies up to the age of 6, and supporting and exposing children to language. Our second speaker is Rebecca.
Hi.
Oh, we're having some technical glitches. Sorry. Oops, sorry, there's something else that changed. Rebecca Siomra, who is a speech language pathologist and working with the Ontario Infant Program, and she has been for many years. And the both of them have a wealth of experience and knowledge in working with families with deaf and hard of hearing children, ages 0 to school age. Both do often work together, and they meet with the families together. Other times they meet with them on their own. And they have such a wealth of information and expertise that they're willing to share with us this evening. So thank you both for being here. And I will then hand it over to the two of you. Please enjoy learning from these two, our two presenters for this evening. I would like to thank everybody for joining us here tonight. The two of us are really excited to present here tonight. And I know that people are wondering about how do you support your child with language development? And Rebecca and I are hoping that with this evening that people will feel more comfortable and knowing about what it means to have early language exposure and how do you support your child, whether it's in sign language or spoken English or both. And we're going to be just sharing some simple strategies that you can share and learn about what you can use in your daily routine so that your children will grow in learning. We have a lot of information on the slides, and afterwards we will make them available so that you can refer back to them. In this presentation, we really do want people to share comments. So if you want to have a comment in the chat, please do so. And we will be having polls. With the polls, they're confidential. We don't know who's answering what. We're not going to be saying, oh, this person said that or this person said that. It's a safe space. There is no judgment. We're not here. It's not about testing. It's about just getting a feel for what's out there. We want to share information. We want to problem solve, and we want to learn together. And participate at any time. If you have any questions, ask. If there's something that's more in depth, you might want to save that to the very end of the presentation. I'm going to hand it over to Rebecca now.
Next slide, please. And next slide, please. Thank you. One of the most exciting parts of our jobs for me and Dallas is that we get to share tips and ideas with parents every day that are free, that are portable, that apply to any language, but that can have a really huge impact on their child's connection with their family and their community. Making small adjustments in the way we share language and interact with our children can give them new opportunities to think and build their confidence and have fun in their daily activities. We will be talking about routines and strategies a little bit later in our presentation, but to get your ideas flowing, we'd like you to type the name of one or two routines or activities that you have in your home with your child to start sharing with each other. You might see ideas that are similar to yours, or you might see something that's new and different that maybe you want to take home tonight to try with your family later on. So just to get some brainstorming going, please feel free to enter your ideas in the chat of what a routine might be or a favorite play activity that you have with your child. We will let people think through that. But if we could go to the next slide, please. Reading stories is always a big one. Before we get too in-depth into our presentation, we want to make sure that we're all using the same definitions for different parts of language so that we're all understanding what Dallas and I are talking about. The foundation of our communication falls under the umbrella of interaction, or you might see the word pragmatics that shows up. And that's really our social skills, our social communication with each other that doesn't really rely on words and language. That could be our eye contact, our facial expressions, our body language, such as reaching out to touch someone or pulling back because you're not so sure about what's happening. Receptive language is how we're understanding language. It's our comprehension, how we're understanding words, how we're understanding sentences and stories, conversation. And those skills start developing really early. Right as soon as a child is exposed to any language, their language comprehension starts to develop. And last is what's often top of mind for families is expressive language. And those are the words and sentences that we use. And the first stages appear through babbling, and first words actually develop after our receptive language skills develop, because we need to know what words are before we can start using them. So that comprehension piece is really important. I'm just taking a peek in the chat and I see lots of routines coming up. Bedtime's routines for sure. Trait care, so medical care, lots of diaper changes, yes, for sure. So lots of similarities of themes from home to home. And also, unique experiences that you might not have thought of that some other families are experiencing. So thank you so much for contributing into the chat. Next slide, please. Language development, of course, starts with language access. And sometimes people might use language exposure and language access interchangeably, but they're really not the same thing. We can be surrounded by people talking or signing with each other, but if we can't hear their words or we can't see their signs, then we can't learn the language. We have two polls to start off with to get you thinking a little bit about how your family is helping your deaf child to access language in their everyday. Next slide, please. So in a moment, you'll see a poll pop up. I don't know, some of you might be familiar with polls, some of you might not. As Dallas mentioned, completely anonymous. Nobody will know what you answered. And a little screen will pop up and will ask you to select any of the options that apply to your family. And then we'll share the results of our group. The answers are rolling in. We have about half of everybody has answered so far. I see the responses are kind of slowing down. So I think maybe, do we want to close the poll and we can share the result? Okay, so from what we're seeing here, of the families who are using ASL in their homes, we have 40%, so almost half of the families who responded are saying that 2 adults, or 30% are saying more than 2 adults in their child's family are using ASL. So that's really nice to see. We know that when ASL is introduced to a child, it's common for having to have one adult, maybe main adult in the family, that's attending sessions, learning the language. But we do know that children learn best when they're surrounded by language. And so we always encourage all of the child's caregivers and siblings too to learn ASL. And that could include neighbors and friends, anybody that's spending time with your child. So it's really nice to see that so many of you are using ASL with your kids, and some families have been able to get multiple adults and some of the siblings included. And so that's just something that we always encourage families to keep in mind, is thinking of how can we expand that language access bubble. So if we have one adult who's learning ASL, maybe there's somebody else in the family that's ready to include, so that the child has more people to communicate with. We have the next slide, please. Okay. And so one of the other challenges that we sometimes face is using hearing technology, and that refers to any of the devices that give a deaf child access to spoken language. So it could be hearing aids, cochlear implants, auditory brainstem implants. So that's what we're wanting you to consider when you're answering this question. So we can get the poll up, please. Thank you. And again, please respond on the screen. Just tap or click on the answer that makes the most sense for your family. Okay, the responses are slowing down, so I'm going to end the poll, and we'll see. You should be able to see the results. That we have a lot of families that are including, that have more than one adult helping to manage a child's hearing technology, and I congratulate you on that. It's not easy. It takes a lot of practice to get comfortable with using hearing technology on little ears. And as with ASL, it is often common that a lot of the responsibility falls on one person. So it's really nice to see so many people that have lots of family members included in that routine. And, if you have older siblings in the house, we also encourage you to let them in on the action. If you've got teenagers in the house along with the little ones, they can help along to increase that hearing technology wear time. Okay, so as we can see from both of those, that giving access to language is a shared responsibility, and it's really nice to see that so many of you have a good support system in your homes, that you have multiple adults that are supporting the access to language for your little ones. And I'm going to stop sharing that and pass it over to Dallas for the next slide, please.
As you can see on the slide, there is a fishbowl, and you have the deaf person that fits into this hearing world. And quite often they feel very separate or isolated, and they can see everybody chatting, but they're not necessarily understanding what's being talked about, what's being said, because there's no access to the language, and it makes it really, really tough. So it does alienate that person. And the deaf person tends to feel that they're missing information and that they don't have the connection. But language is so valuable. And it happens quite often to a lot of deaf people out there where they don't have the access to the language because they're not connected. They don't know what's going on. People assume that they might have already heard something, but they haven't. So this fishbowl is a, an idea of what it looks like. And the goal of our seminars is to make sure that your child has access to language so that child can have those connections with other people and understand their environment and feel included. And they know what's being talked about, whether it's world events, but they can participate because they have language. So they can come out of that fishbowl and be part of those connections. I'll switch it back. Next slide, and we'll go back to Rebecca. Oh, sorry, it's my turn again. Oops. We're not going back to Rebecca. So we're looking at early language development. And that encompasses a lot of things when we talk about all of the milestones. And we will not be covering all the milestones, but we'll just talk about what is involved with American Sign Language and English and what are the key points when we talk about the early stages. And because when we look at developmental language, it's the same, whether it's a spoken language or a signed language. Next slide, please. You often hear about that critical period of a language acquisition from 0 to 3, and it's a crucial point in terms of brain development and how that brain works on taking in information, and they understand their world, and what they need is a rich language exposure to develop a strong foundation for their academic life and their everyday life. For deaf and hard of hearing children, they need the support. They need to have improvement to language. And we have to make sure that they are being exposed to ongoing language and having support in by doing ASL classes, but it could be on the playground. It could be hearing technical devices and that, but it's really important that we meet the needs of the child and what works best for the child. And it's important that the point that we're trying to make is early exposure, not saying, okay, we're going to wait till later. We're going to do this first and not this, but if there's no language, we have to get language in right away. Now I'll switch over and hand it over to Rebecca. Next slide, please, for Rebecca.
The next several slides have a lot of milestones for both ASL and English on them. As Dallas mentioned, we will not go through them. I just wanted to highlight a few key points as we go through them, and then we'll get into talking a little bit more about what we do with all of this information. But to start off with, newborns are very busy taking in the information around them. They start to look at people's faces with curiosity, they're tracking movement, and they're starting to experiment with how their body moves and how their voices work. Next slide, please. As babies approach 6 months, they're spending more time awake, and that really makes a difference. They're physically stronger, so they can look around more easily, to find people, to smile, start understanding and copying what's going on around them. Copying and taking turns are the foundation of conversation. It starts to develop really early. Next slide, please. Many of the first big steps in language learning start to emerge between 6 and 12 months old, when babies start to follow simple requests, so they're starting to understand language for the first time. We see a difference, though, between ASL and English in this stage because babies are starting to use quite a few signs in this stage of development. But with spoken language, they're really starting to master some of the different sounds and might not use their first word until closer to 12 months. And for this reason, a lot of families, even if their children have full access to speech through hearing, like to introduce signs to their babies because babies can access those signs so early and start using them. And it helps children to learn to advocate for themselves because they're developing words and communication early. Next slide, please. From 12 to 18 months, babies are continuing to develop their vocabulary, follow more requests, and understand a lot more words than they're using. And so that's that point that I mentioned before, that comprehension really starts to develop and get strong before babies are really able to express a lot. Next slide, please. The next big milestone to emerge is children following two-part instructions and starting to connect two words together as their vocabularies build and they have a bigger variety of words. At this stage, there are a lot of similarities again between ASL and English development. Next slide, please, and then next slide, please. From 2 to 3 years old, toddlers really begin to expand their word knowledge to include more descriptions, more action words. They're using longer phrases, and they want to understand a lot about the world. We start to see kids asking lots of questions at this stage. And so as you can see, a lot changes very quickly in the life of a baby with what they're understanding about words and how they're using words. Next slide, please. We did not want to forget to mention that in a lot of cases, the families we support aren't using the same language that we're using. And so what happens if a family is using a different language than one that one of their professionals is able to also use? Next slide, please. So when we look at supporting other spoken languages, we always encourage families to use the language that makes the most sense for their home and is accessible to their child. For some families, that might be Chinese Sign Language, that might be Tamil. We support families in teaching their child the language of their choice to the best of our ability and the language that makes sense for their child. Early language milestones are very similar across spoken languages in terms of when the first words show up, when we start building phrases, when we're starting to understand and to be able to follow instructions. Some differences emerge when we're starting to look at fine-tuning grammar, but those basic early milestones are very similar. We also recognize that for many families, the dominant language in home is spoken, but a deaf child might need sign language to access language. In this situation, families are encouraged to use the language that's most accessible to their deaf baby, so they can develop strong language skills as they get ready to go to school and beyond. Next slide, please. Similar to different spoken languages, we may be supporting families who are using different signed languages in their homes. And so similarly to spoken language, we want to do our best to encourage families to use the language that's strongest for them. So if a family is using Russian Sign Language in their home, then we would be supporting their use of Russian Sign Language at home. And we don't necessarily use all of those different languages. And so as much as our programs can support, we do include use of interpreters in our therapy sessions and our meetings based on the family's needs. Sometimes it can be a challenge to find an interpreter for a specific dialect or language, but we do our best so that families can fully participate in our sessions and support their child in the language that is the most important to their family. I'm just noticing a question in the chat around this specific topic, I think, and I wanted to, but I'm not completely understanding. I'm wondering if you would be able to clarify it's enough. The question that shows in the chat is, how do accessibility for support language? And I'm not sure if that's different languages or language access for a deaf child. Okay. We will move on. If I see a clarification come up, we'll come back to that question and we can address it later. Thank you for asking. Next slide, please. So what is communication? For us to communicate, somebody needs to be sending a message, somebody needs to be receiving a message, and somebody needs to respond in some way. And we also both need to be focusing on the same thing so that we're talking about the same thing. Sometimes all of the people in an interaction are communicating at the same time, but in different ways. For example, if Dallas is telling me about a really great recipe that she tried, I might be smiling and nodding and reacting to encourage her while she's sharing that recipe. So we're both actually communicating at the same time. For babies and young children, their communication is probably not words yet, but it is their facial expressions, their body movements, their vocalizations. And so our conversations with babies don't look like words back and forth, but babies can definitely have those conversations with us in their own way. Next slide, please. Just another brainstorming session to make sure everybody's still awake out there. I want you to look at the picture that's on the screen and think about, what is the joint focus in this picture? Who is sending a message? Who's receiving a message? How did you know? There's a lot happening in the picture with 3 different people. And there's usually more than one answer for any situation. Everybody has their own perspective on what's happening when they're looking at a conversation or participating in a conversation. So please feel free to put your ideas in the chat as you think about what's happening in this very busy picture with all these happy people. Yeah, it might be that somebody asked a question and Daddy's explaining. Daddy's very animated. I'm curious about what that conversation is. Maybe somebody's going on an airplane ride. Could be talking about their day for sure. Next slide, please. Interaction is important because it helps children learn how to pay attention, to play, to take turns, to learn what words are all about, and to start imitating words. All of this supports communication and language development. But the most important thing to remember is that back and forth interaction is the foundation of communication, and that later on will support those conversations back and forth with words. But all of this starts from day one. I'm going to pass it over to Dallas for the next slide.
Okay, so the next question is how old should the child be before we start communicating with them? So we'll put the poll up and then choose your answers, please. So the responses are from 0 to 6 months is starting right away, and I think it's really important. Some people, oh, they don't understand me or whatever. It doesn't matter. Right? We start the communication process immediately, and that's what we've been talking about. Is the it's very crucial that we start as early as possible. That 0 to 6 months, you expose them to whatever, so they have language access, and you know there could be other things, but we want to encourage people to start off right away. And we are talking about early acquisition to language. Great. The next slide, please. And I think I'll hand it over.
When we're looking at why we communicate, we have there could be for so many reasons. Think of all of the different reasons that you might have communicated with somebody today. It may have been somebody at work, it might have been at the grocery store interacting with somebody in the checkout line, it might have been emailing somebody, it may have been trying to get into the Zoom meeting, but you were having technical difficulties and you had to ask for help. There's so many reasons why we might need to communicate with somebody else. And babies need to learn all of these different reasons too. Initially, babies are communicating more for that social connection. They're not using words yet. They're just really wanting to be connected with us. And very quickly, we start to see them learning how to protest, whether that's through crying or pushing away or kicking their feet because they want us to move away. They're requesting something. They are looking for their snack. They're looking for their bottle. They're looking for hugs. They're looking for somebody to pick them up. We know that babies, toddlers, and young preschoolers have really big feelings. And so they find different ways to communicate their feelings, first through their actions and through their sounds that they might be making. And as they get older, we support them in learning the language that they need to be able to express how they're feeling so that their day can go by a little more easily. So telling us that they're all done with something, or telling us that they feel excited or so frustrated about something. And learning how to express our feelings can really help us to feel more regulated through the day. As kids get older, they are using their language to share their interest in information. They want to tell us what happened. They saw somebody outside that was blowing bubbles and it was so exciting. Or they fell down and they scraped their knee. Learning to answer and ask questions is also part of early communication. And I'm going to pass it over to Dallas for the next slide.
The next question for our poll is how often should we communicate with our baby during the day? Yeah, a lot of the answers are stating it should be throughout the whole day. And that's what we want to focus in, whether it's spoken or signed. We want to make sure that exposure happens all day long, every day. Next slide, please. Okay, handing that over again to you, Rebecca.
The rest of our presentation, we're going to focus on, sorry, I'm just going to get rid of the poll. We're going to focus on communication strategies that you can use during your everyday routines and activities. And the three that we're focusing on are following your child's lead, waiting, and that's really, really hard for adults, and responding in all the different ways that we can respond to help expand language and encourage language development. And of course, with all of these, the interaction should be fun for everybody involved. So we're wanting to do these in ways that are interesting and motivating for your baby and your young child. And I'm going to send it to Dallas for the next slide, please.
All right, the poll is, what language would you use in this moment? So what would you focus in on in this particular scenario?
This is a tricky one.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, the answer is that it could be any of these. There isn't a right or wrong answer at all. Yeah, hang on a second. Yes. It's about just having access to language, whether it's spoken or signed. So if it's milk, do you want some milk? Do you want a bottle? Do you want to drink milk? All of them are correct. It really depends on the exposure of language. Do they have signs? Do they not have signs? It's just about providing access to language. And the communication strategy that we're looking at is following your child's lead. Quite often we tend to take over. We're wanting to teach them. We're wanting to explain everything to them. But the child is already demonstrating what they're interested in. They can show us what their interests are. So we need to follow their lead and work with what they're interested in. If it's the sign for that, or if it's the word for that in spoken English or in another spoken language. And I think that would be more beneficial for a child because they're interested in it. So they can put those puzzle pieces together. And it's easier to learn language if they're interested. And it doesn't matter if it's a small idea or the impact is larger. You can see in this picture, you see that child with the horse, and you can follow the child's lead by saying, oh, that's a horse. It's a brown horse. You can expand that concept in different ways versus saying, oh, we're going to talk about the blocks. I want to talk about the blocks. And the kid's not interested in the blocks. They are interested in the horse. So let's work with what they're interested in, because then whatever it is that they're seeing, we can make those connections in their world in real time. And the child wants you there. They want to play with you. You can add different ideas. You can expand on that. Like if you are working with blocks, you could bring in a car and you can smash those blocks down. And then that provides a nice scenario for them to be involved with. So the next slide, and we'll pass it back to Rebecca.
So this middle strategy is a challenging one for adults. And we encourage you to learn to be okay with the silence, with not saying something while you're waiting for your child to take their turn. As adults, we have a lot of experience with language, and we can pull information from the context around us, and we can understand what's happening very quickly. Little kids don't have this kind of experience, and so they need time to be able to think about what just happened and plan their next move, because they might need to think of a word, or they might need to think about, well, how am I going to do that by myself? And so we need to give them time. And that's when we need to give them space. It's really hard, but we do encourage you to not be a mind reader. It's okay to let your child have to do some of the thinking and to struggle a little bit to figure out how they're going to share with you what they want. Your job is to add the language, but their job is to try to find some way to express what they're thinking about or what their needs are to you. And we can do this in a few different ways. We can, if we know that our child, for example, is going to want the milk that's up on the counter, but they're just sort of standing there and waiting, we can look at them and we can look really expectant. Lean into them, open your eyes, and make them feel like you're expecting them to do something, and they will feel that social pressure and they'll realize, oh, I have to do something first. They're not just going to do everything for me and it's going to magically come into my hands. And so it can be as simple as leaning in and waiting and looking expectant. You might say a word and then stop signing, stop talking, and just wait. So you might sign milk, or you want milk, and wait. Instead of grabbing it right away, say it, wait, and see what your child does next. Do they point to the milk? Maybe they try to copy it. Maybe they make the sign. Maybe they make a sound, but it gives them a chance to be participating in that turn-taking conversation. The third way is one that's a little more fun, I think, and it's our next slide. It's where we can start creating some situations where we're giving the child a reason to communicate. Because sometimes in a play, in our regular lives, we kind of go on autopilot and we don't always think about, oh, I could create a new chance for them to practice communicating. The more opportunities our little ones have to practice using language, practice communicating, the better communicators they'll be and the more language they can start to learn. So I'll just give you a couple of ideas from this list. Offering choices can be really powerful to kids. So if it's snack time, instead of saying, oh, do you want cookies? And all they need to do is answer yes or no. Lots of kids are really good at answering yes and no. We could ask them, do you want a cookie or a granola bar? They still might not say or sign one of those words because maybe they're not comfortable with it yet, but they've seen the words, they've heard the words, so they've been exposed to more language, and they might reach for or point to the one that they want. Or, because you've just modeled it, they might try to copy and do their best version of copying the word for the one that they want. So offering choices can be really, really powerful. The other one that can be really helpful in lives of little ones is offering bit by bit. And the way that I encourage families to do this is often, again, around food. Food is very motivating for young kids, but you could do this with toys like blocks as well, or puzzle pieces, is if you know that your child will want lots of something, so all of the blocks, or they're going to want a really big handful of goldfish crackers, only give them a few to start off with, and they will munch down those few, and then they need to ask you for more. It's not being mean. It's giving your child another opportunity to practice using their language, to practice communicating. So whether it's you modeling and them copying you, or them telling you in some other creative way that they want more of something, it's giving them a chance to practice. It's empowering them to learn how to be a better communicator. I see a question that came in the chat, and maybe we'll hold it to the end. I'm going to pass it to the next slide for Dallas to continue.
This next slide speaks to early visual communication as a foundation. And this pre-language, they're already communicating through gestures, through eye contact, facial expressions. So if I'm signing or speaking to the child's already taking in information. However they take it in, doesn't matter. They're still taking in information, and we can develop different strategies. And it's really important to use different strategies. If it's visual, if it's listening, if it's gesturing, it's really important that we follow the child's lead and we look at what's better for them. And as Rebecca was saying, take that moment to wait a bit and see what they respond to and what language approach works for them. And we can see how they process it. And that's a good lead, and we can create strategies for that child. And for early access to language, it's crucial because with sign language, you know, people will used to say that it would, if they learned sign language, it would affect their spoken abilities, but it doesn't, because their brains are developing language and the template is in their brain. They just have to access it. And research has shown that spoken language and sign language, the brain takes the language as a language, regardless of whether it's signed or spoken. They're still getting the same message. One researcher, Dr. Laura Petito, and she said that the brain doesn't discriminate languages. So whether it's a language from hands or a spoken language, the brain is processing it the same. And we need to look at access to language and have a strong foundation for the future. It's important to look at the languages and not saying it's either or. We want to make sure that the child has access to a language just from the onset. Next slide, please. Once again, another poll. How would you respond, or what would you sign or say to this particular picture? And we'll just wait for the poll to show up. Okay, I've seen the message that there's a technical issue right now, so we're just waiting for the poll. I mean, your options are the car and B. Somebody was saying something about an old poll. Just give me a second here. Oh, here it is. Great. Once again, all the answers are correct. The important thing is that we give it time. We wait. Whoops, hang on a second here. And it could be one word, it could be a combination of signs, it could be a combination of words. It's a car, and there's different ways to show the car, but just providing access to language. Next slide, please. Oh, I'll switch it back to Rebecca.
Okay. And so to continue on from that last poll that Dallas did, we want to move on to the strategy of responding and all the different ways that we can respond to a child's communication to help grow their language. So it might be something like interpreting their actions, even if it's not, if it's not a sign or it's not a word. We're looking at, like, that little boy was pointing to a car, so we could simply name what it was that he was pointing to. If he pointed at the car and signed or said car, we might copy what he said because maybe we're wanting him to see a more precise version of the sign or hear a more accurate version of the word. So we might say it exactly the same way that he says it. Or we might expand and add more information where when we're using that strategy and expanding, we're wanting to stay one step bigger than what the child is doing. So if they aren't using any words, we give them one word. If they are saying one word, so if he says car, then we might respond with, yeah, it's a red car, or it's a big car, where we're adding one more word or two more words to give him a little more information. Making comments is really powerful because it's giving information to children. When we're looking at questions, we want to be careful. Children catch on pretty quickly if we're asking questions just for the sake of asking a question because we're trying to test them. So I always ask families to remember, if you're going to ask a question, try to make it a real question. Make it a question that you don't know the answer to. Do you want that milk? Where do you want to go? Instead of asking them those testing questions all the time that might look like, what color is it? What is this? When you know it's a horse, they know it's a horse. And so, but if we said, do you want the horse or the cat? That's a more legitimate question because we don't know which one they might want. So looking at limiting questions, and if we're going to ask a question, try to ask a real question when you can. And I'm going to pass it over to Dallas.
Before we go into this poll, I just wanted to add something. You know, when we see the kids, whether they're speaking or signing, sometimes kids will just kind of, like, it's important not to just nod. We want to say, oh, what do you mean? Do you mean the car, like the red car or the purple car? Which car are you talking about? So you encourage them and say, oh, yes, 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 yes. Because if we just say yes to whatever utterance they have, they don't know that they need to expand on that. So we need to be able to clarify, not just nod. And we have to make sure that we're not just nodding for the sake of nodding. So anyways, next slide, yes. So we have another poll. When the child signs apple, what can you do to expand on that language? Awesome. Once again, all the answers are right, but if we're looking at expanding things, we can ask a question. You know, do you want the apple? We could say, we could have descriptors. Is it a green apple? Is it actively eating the apple? So we can expand on just that one word. So that's great. Next slide, please. So using language in everyday moments. We talked about following the child's lead, waiting, responding, and help building language in everyday moments. We have some other tips that I'd like to share with you. And this is one is self-talk. This is really, really important because quite often you kind of talk, you know, to think, you know, I'm going to talk to myself. This is kind of weird, but no, it's not, because once you try this, you get used to it. And it could be something like while you're cooking in the kitchen, like, oh, well, I'm cooking, I'm cutting up the carrot, and you're narrating what it is that you're doing, whatever that is, whether it's spoken English or a spoken language or a sign language. But the child then has access to the process, and it's really beneficial because they can eavesdrop on your self-talk, and it's sort of a natural progression to learn. And then we have parallel talk. It's really important to talk about what's happening and being able to check in with your child so you can have that clarified versus when something happens and then you go and try to address it later, they've forgotten that moment. You have to be in the moment. So the parent has to be aware of that and be able to talk about the actions and the games, much like, well, kids love having you around instead of pressuring them like, what is this, what is that? You're just kind of going with the flow. You could talk about the horse and how the horse trots along and how it runs or how it walks, or be really creative, and the kids always love to do that. And the next one is just modeling and, or sorry, expansion, like using words like more apples. Yeah, it's like, oh yes, it's a brown horse, or adding to it and expanding on it. And you're there to work with the child and help them with that sentence development by adding more vocabulary in. And the praise and just that whole, yeah, good job or whatever. And with that positivity, the child build it builds their confidence and they get excited. They want to talk about different things. It boosts them up. So it's really important that we encourage language acquisitions in a very positive way, and kids feel really good about what they've done, and you want to keep them motivated. And when we look at those connections, it's being sure that we are creative, and we want kids to be learning on a daily basis. We take advantage of those small moments. And it's important that the family members are learning ASL or spoken language to be able to model for the children. Next slide, please.
I
All right,
am
I'll hand
mindful
it over.
of the I am mindful of the time, and we are just about finished. This is our last content slide. That our final reminder is to include a variety of words when you are modeling and expanding and using your parallel talk and your self-talk. We are really good at focusing on names of things and labels, but we also want to be descriptive and use lots of action words so that kids can learn how to build their phrases. They need a big variety of words to be able to build phrases and sentences as they get older. And so that's just our final reminder of, you don't have to stick to one category. Don't worry about being too complicated. Kids need a variety of words. It's boring for them if we're always labeling the exact same things all the time. They need information, so don't be shy about sharing that at a level that they're ready for. And that's end of slide for that one. And we'll move on to the next one, where we can field some of the questions. I've seen a couple that have come in into the chat. So Dallas, I don't know if you want to look at those or if you want me to take some of them.
I'll just take a look, because one person had mentioned something about the accessibility, and they said, well, how can we provide accessibility to a deaf child and prepare them for their first communication? What are the crucial things to know about communication? I don't know if you want to tackle that one, Rebecca.
What about you?
When we talk about access to communication, it's the eye contact, it's the facial grammar, it's the verbal response, it's the hands, it's the movement. That's the first communication. And then as you have those connections, you can build language into those bits of communication. Did you want to add anything to that, Rebecca?
No, I agree. It's starting with what feels natural for you and watching to see how your child is responding. If your child is more tuned into you when you are giving them more visual information, then that's really important for you to be aware of, because that's telling you that that's how your baby or your child is accessing the world around them. And so also watching to see what their responses are, following their lead and waiting to see how they react to what you do or what you say, depending on which language that you're using with them. And that connects with a comment that's came in later on. around being a sportscaster and talking. So this is that parallel talk that Dallas was commenting on, talking about what your child is doing and trying not to trying not to assume what they might be thinking and feeling. Sometimes we need to take our best guess and we just have to put a word out there because we think that that's what they want or how they're feeling. And then we step back and wait, because if we get it wrong, these little ones will let us know that we made the wrong guess, that we're talking about the wrong thing. And so we'll be able to tell by their body language or through their next turn in conversation whether what we were commenting on is appropriate or not. And that's where that power of waiting is really important when we are doing the parallel talk. And I love that sportscaster analogy. I think that that makes sense to a lot of people.
The same person had I mentioned, like if the parents are ready, should they prepare for communication and sign first? But what happens, like if the child isn't ready for the communication at that moment? I mean, we have to look at the parallel. If it's a hearing parent or a deaf parent, I mean, they're going to learn with their child. If you feel that maybe they're behind, if you're behind in sign, you can take classes. There's all kinds of apps that you can improve your signing skills if that's what you feel you want to improve on. The baby is going to acquire language automatically because the brain is getting ready to do that. So as long as they have access to language, they'll pick it up. So we have to make sure that we're providing them with the language that they can pick up. You will see your baby, you can assess what they're doing. You know their cries, you know when they're not happy, if they need a diaper change, you know that hunger cry. You know, so you start, that's basic communication. It's already happening. Well, hi, everybody. Thank you so much for our presenters. And I'm glad that we've had lots of comments, but if there's any questions, if you don't want to type it, if you want to ask it or sign it, you can put your camera on and we can spotlight you if you want to ask it instead of type it.
I will also comment, there's one slide after this. We've included our contact emails in our slides, and so you will have that as well. If you wanted to reach out to one of us individually, then you're more than welcome to if you have specific questions that we could help with.
And if I can just like Tony was saying about the Apple question, like what's the right answer? It's like they're all the right answer. The point is that we want to expand. We want to look at what are the actions with the Apple. There isn't a right or wrong answer. I just want to remind people that we've recorded this session. So once we're done in a few days, we will have it on the Parents of Deaf and Hard of Hearing webpage. We will also have it on YouTube. So it will be accessible to people to look at it again, and you will have access if you've registered with this webinar. Once again, I want to say thank you very much to our presenters, both Dallas and Rebecca, for sharing their expertise and their knowledge and their tips with all of us here tonight. I see a lot of people commenting that they really enjoyed the session, and I agree. It's been a fantastic session, so thank you to the both of you. I would also like to thank the interpreters that we have here tonight. And then I want to thank Mana for doing all the stuff behind the scenes and getting those polls and the slides going, our tech guru. I also want to thank all of you for being here that made the effort to come and register and listen and learn. So thank you so much for being here tonight. And I hope that everybody else enjoys the rest of their evening. So thank you for coming out.